Bhagavatam. The Puranas were compiled before Mahabharata. That is an estimation of the date of compilation of different Vedic literature. The synopsis of Srimad Bhagavatam was given before the detailed description under instructions of Narada. Srimad Bhagavatam is a science for following the path of Nibriti Marga. The path of Prabriti Marga was condemned by Narada. That path is a natural inclination for all conditioned souls. The theme of Srimad Bhagavatam is the cure of materialistic disease of human being, or stopping completely the pangs of material existence. We have read this yesterday, so let us go to the next verse. Saunaka vacha savai nibrati nirataha sarvatropekhyako muni kasyava bruhatim it etam atmarama samabhyasat. Śrī Śaunaka asked Sūta Gosvāmī, Śrī Śukadeva Gosvāmī was already on the path of self-realization, and thus he was pleased with his own self. So why did he take the trouble to undergo the study of such a vast literature? Purport. For the people in general, the highest perfection of life is to cease from materialistic activities and be fixed on the path of self-realization. Those who take pleasure in the sense enjoyment, or those who are fixed in material bodily welfare work, are called karmis. Out of thousands and millions of such karmis, one may become atmarama by self-realization. Atma means self, arama means take pleasure. Everyone is searching after the highest pleasure, but the standard of pleasure of one may be different from the standard of another. Therefore, the standard of pleasure enjoyed by the karmis is different from that of atmarama. The atmaramas are completely indifferent to material enjoyment in every respect. Śrīla Sukadeva Gosvami had already attained that stage, and still he was attracted to undergo the trouble of studying the great Bhagavatam literature. This means that Srimad Bhagavatam is a postgraduate study even for atmaramas who have surpassed all studies of Vedic knowledge. Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dear devotees, we saw how Vyasadev was revealed Srimad Bhagavatam in his trance, and he taught this Srimad Bhagavatam to his own son Sukadeva Goswami, who is already an atmarama. And the question here is, how an atmarama is studying Srimad Bhagavatam? He is atmarama. That is the ultimate goal of life. This very question would give rise to the most famous verse of the entirety of Srimad Bhagavatam. Atmaramasya munayo nirgranthapi urukrama urvanti ahaitu kim bhaktim ittha bhuto guno hari. So, how atmaramas are naturally attracted to devotional service of Krishna. So that part we'll discuss tomorrow. It's a very, very important verse. But today let us summarize whatever we have now read. So what it is saying, Śaunaka Rishi and his friends, they were aware of greatness of Śrī Śukadeva Gosvāmī. They knew that Sukadeva Goswami was a very elevated soul who, from his birth, has not associated with matter. That means Sukadeva Goswami doesn't know what is sense gratification. Sukadeva Goswami is that personality who is with a pure mind, pure intellect. Sukadeva Goswami is that person who doesn't have false ego. So you can imagine Sukadeva Goswami is a personality who appears to have a body, a gross body like us, and certainly a subtle body has to be there. But he never lived in any body, right? So we mostly live in our gross body, and we also live in our subtle body, because subtle body generates desires, subtle body generates the ideas how to satisfy one's desire, and gross body is used to implement those subtle body desires. So now question here is that Sukadeva Goswami, who is dwelling in his self from the very birth, is dwelling in his self from the very birth, जो जन्म से ही आत्मा में स्थित है, ऐसे महापुरुष सुखदेव गोस्वामी क्यों भागवतम की पढ़ाई की? Why did he study Bhagavatam? Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses, 18,000 slok. And to study this great literature scrutinizingly, because reading something doesn't mean, because it's a description, right? So any description that you read, that description is in a language, and incidentally this language happened to be Sanskrit. So again, language can at best refer to matter, because spirit is beyond matter. Spirit is beyond language. Spirit is beyond space. Spirit is beyond time. यानी कि भाषा, समय, स्थान, कोई भी चीज आत्मा को स्पर्श नहीं कर सकता। तो जो आत्मा में स्थित है वो फिर भौतिक चीज को क्यों स्वीकार करें? कितना भी प्यूरिफाइड या सैंक्टिफाइड ना हो, even if everything material, the object of this world, is made absolutely pure, still those who are already beyond matter, why they should come and embrace the matter? This is the question. And a valid question. Valid question. And Śaunaka Rishi asked this question. And anybody who would understand the secret of this question will understand Krishna consciousness properly. So, before I conclude, let me summarize first. This is the 9th verse. So, the question was, what did Vyasadev do after Narada instructed Vyasadev to directly glorify Krishna, the absolute truth? Then Vyasa sat in a trance or meditation in his Samyaprasa ashrama, which is situated in the bank of river Saraswati. And there he insulated himself completely from matter. And as he meditated on Krishna, he saw the absolute truth Krishna in his original form, his sweetest LILA pastime, divine LILA, that took place in Braj, Mathura, Dwarka, and other places as well. His incarnations, Vamandev, Narasimhadev, Lord Rama, Narayana, Varaha, Matsya, Kurma, Parasurama, Buddha, Kalki, and he saw in that trance pure devotees of Krishna, the way they are engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness. The examples are Narada, Rishabdev, Jadbharat, Navayogendras, Lord Shiva, Brahmaji, Prahlada. And then he saw how perfected souls from conditioned life, they are transformed by devotional service. Many such examples from Chitraketu to Dhruva. And then the conditioned soul, how it is struggling through the examples of Puranjana, Yati, and many others. how Maya deluded atheistic people headed by Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyakya, all the demons in Dwarka LILA, Paundraka, Rukmi, Sisupala, Dantabakra, Jarasandha, how they were not only deluded, they were annihilated. The Asuras were deluded by Mohini during churning ocean. He was also revealed the illusory energy that is capable of bewildering personalities up to Lord Shiva. So it was revealed, except Vishnu, everybody else can be bewildered by the illusory potency of Krishna. So this summary of revelation made Vyasadev to compile this great literature called Srimad Bhagavatam and taught it to his own son, Sukadeva Goswami. Sukadeva Goswami narrated this great literature to Maharaj Parikshit. Later, when 88,000 sages in Naimisharanya were performing fire sacrifice to check the influence of Kali Purusha, and they failed to check the influence of Kali Purusha, they realized it has become futile. So what must be the process? So those days, Sūta Gosvāmī was a celebrated sage. So sages brought Sūta Gosvāmī, gave him Vyasasana, and asked him questions. So again, in that great assembly, Srimad Bhagavatam was revealed through Sūta Gosvāmī. And that revelation, as it is the subject matter that is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. So this great literature, one has to study. And it is said, Prabhupada is saying, normally this world is full of karmis. Suppose there are 7 billion population. You can easily say 6.9 billion or 6.999 billion population is karmi. They want sense gratification. And whatever fraction of billions are left, out of them, there will be many who are jnanis, self-realized. Those who have insulated themselves from the matter. Those who don't indulge in any sense gratification. And then out of many such self-realized souls, very few are Paramatma realized. And even still very few among these self-realized souls are devotees. Because as Brahmaji would pray in Brahma Vimohan Lila, that to conceive Krishna's personal form is most difficult. Because it is incomprehensible and inconceivable that the same Krishna who is Yashoda Nandana, within him, trillions of universes are existing, both spiritual and material. So this is very, very difficult to comprehend, number one. Number two, personal feature of Krishna will be revealed when we start pleasing Krishna. And pleasing Krishna is not so easy. Pleasing Krishna means pleasing Sadhu, Guru and Shastra plus Krishna. And to please means we have to understand the personal interest of Krishna. Like in this example, Sukadeva Goswami was self-realized, but he came forward and pleased Krishna by studying great Srimad Bhagavatam. So if we are reading Bhagavad Gita, that would please Krishna. If you are memorizing Bhagavad Gita, then that would please Krishna. If we are understanding Srimad Bhagavatam, that would also please Krishna. And then going beyond, using Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, contemplate on the transcendental nature of Krishna. Then Krishna reveals to us our own form, what we are. Krishna reveals to us our relationship with Krishna. Krishna reveals to us what does he like in that relationship, or how can we please Krishna in that relationship. So there is a process. That process must be accepted, internalized. I was at Dehradun for the last 2 days. Before this trip, the previous trip, Binu Mataji asked me this question, that what is the form of the yogis who are Paramatma realized? And let me tell you, nobody had asked this question to me in my 30 years of journey. So questions are very important. Just like I have explained, those who are jnanis, Brahman realize. What is their form? Their form is spiritual spark. Spiritual spark. I can't conceive what is that spiritual spark, but I can conceive spiritual spark is that tiniest divine object which has no tinge of materialism. And on your own, you can appreciate when I withdraw myself from all my senses, my mind, my intelligence, my false ego, what is left is that divine object. Very tiny, insignificant, a spiritual spark. We need to do some contemplation. So now the question is, what is your form when you, what is your form when you, what is your form when you are Paramatma realized? So let me make a correction here. When you are Paramatma realized or Brahman realized, you have withdrawn yourself to same spiritual spark. Same spiritual spark. You are that spiritual spark without no tinge of materialism. But what normally happens in this age of Kali, in specifically, a Jnani considers when he insulates himself and feels joyful, he feels he is one within the totality of Brahman. So he assumes Aruhya Kutsrena Param Padam Tato. He assumes that he has become God. He merges himself in his own mind to the totality of Brahman. Sometime I was contemplating for these rascals how Brahman would look. They say Brahman doesn't have form, but then they still think Brahman is some kind of transcendental light. So light certainly has a form. Krishna's effulgence has a form. And I have contemplated on this and I realized in this world there is nothing that doesn't have a form. So formlessness is an absolute illusion. Thus, my conclusion after contemplating on this, I realize nothing can be formless. Nothing can be formless. Everything has a form. The atom has a form. The energy has a form. Everything has a form. So now the question here is that a Paramatma realized fellow also, he thinks he is that spiritual spark and one with the absolute truth. But what is the distinction between Paramatma realized and Jnani? A Jnani is atmarama, joyful within, whereas Paramatma realized, he, through the help of Paramatma, via medium of Paramatma, becomes kind of Trikalagya and gets whatever according to his desire. He gets into many mystic potencies, Prapti, Siddhi, Laghima, Anima, and so forth. And by that process, he falls victim to these mystic potencies and derails, gets derailed. And examples are Saubhari Muni, Durvasa, and we can give so many examples by which such people they fall down. But what is Sukadeva Goswami? Sukadeva Goswami was different. He was self-realized, but he never considered himself part of that one unitary whole. He was just a Brahmavadi. Hence, he rejoiced within the self. It basically, the distinction between him and the Jnanis speculate, and Sukadeva Goswami was not a speculator. That is only the distinction. But the question still is valid. When you are naturally joyful, why should you come and study Srimad Bhagavatam? That question is still there. And the answer to this question is that Krishna consciousness is infinitely joyful, infinitely more joyful than the so-called Brahmananda. And this part we are going to discuss tomorrow. Thank you very much. Bolo a question.
Sir, Akhe Prabhu is asking, as the parrot of Radha Rani Sukadeva Goswami must be well versed in all the principles of Bhagavatam, then why is it said that he was only a Brahmagyani at birth and then learned Srimad Bhagavatam from Vyasadeva and graduated to the platform of pure devotional service?
Anybody who comes to this material world is a place of ignorance. And to describe divinity in the place of ignorance is always a challenge. So Sukadeva Goswami protected himself or insulated himself from the matter. So your question is that how did he forget? His Krishna consciousness. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Mataha Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. I, as a tiny living entity, I always depend on Krishna for my memory, for my knowledge, for my forgetfulness. So in this case, Krishna forgot. Krishna gave him forgetfulness of his previous, of his eternal situation. Krishna can do that to anyone. And as far as studying Srimad Bhagavatam, anybody who would come to this, even Rupa Goswami, when he comes here, he has to learn Sanskrit. He has to learn the Shastra. Because once you come here, you have to be part of this population. You have to act like this population. And then speak to them in their own language so that they can appreciate. So all Paramahamsas, they come here, they have to act like us, they have to live like us, they have to learn our own language, and then they have to speak to us in our own language by which we can understand what is Krishna consciousness. Same Rupa Goswami, if he goes to another culture, he would behave according to that culture. Rupa Goswami was born or appeared 500 years ago here. If he were to appear now, he would act differently. Again, they are always under the protection of the internal potency of Krishna. Okay.
Chiranjeev Prabhu is Chiranjeev Prabhu is asking, is Sukha Goswami and Sūta Gosvāmī the same person?
No, Sukadeva Goswami's disciple is Sūta Gosvami. Sūta Gosvami is a disciple of Sukadeva Goswami. Sūta Goswami is a disciple of Sukadeva Goswami.
And Sarvagya Prabhu is asking, what is the form does Paramatma realized people conceive in their trance?
I said same spiritual spark. They withdraw themselves to a kind of a singularity where there is no material space, material time. But in their polluted intelligence, they think that that entity is part of the absolute Brahman, the larger Brahman. And that is how they conclude that they are one with the Supreme.
But sir, this much only, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarvesya krupa sindhavevacha patitanang pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Pramanande. Hari Hari Gaur.